In a packed hall where representatives from 23 African nations stood witness, Nigeria's Bola Tinubu mocked Ibrahim Traoré, triggering a moment of humiliation so profound it shocked millions across the continent. What began as a political jab quickly spiraled into a defining confrontation, one that peeled back decades of injustice, violence, and racial divides that continue to shape Africa's destiny. But this was more than just a clash of words. It was a bold challenge to old power structures, a spark that ignited hope for change. Are we watching the birth of a new era, one fueled by courage and the relentless pursuit of justice? Or are these the final tremors before the collapse of a worn-out order? Before we dive deeper, a gentle reminder. While this story draws from real faces and fierce emotions, some elements are dramatized to capture the spirit and intensity of the moment. The truth of the feelings, struggles, and hopes. That part is very real. Join us now as we explore a moment that shook a continent and challenged everything we thought we knew about leadership, legacy, and the fight for what's right. In the bustling heart of Lagos, Nigeria's largest city, a young Bola Tinubu navigated the tangled labyrinth of crowded streets, narrow alleys, and endless noise. The city breathed life, chaos, and opportunity all at once. But for Bola, growing up here was a relentless test of will. His family was not wealthy, but they were rich in stories, values, and an unshakable spirit that would shape his destiny. Each morning, the sun cast long, golden shafts through the gaps between rusted tin roofs and crumbling facades. Bola watched his mother rise before dawn, balancing pots of steaming porridge on her head, whispering prayers that their small home would hold steady against the city's unforgiving tides. His father, a hardworking civil servant, returned tired each night, his hands worn but his resolve unbroken. From them, Bola learned early lessons. That resilience was not a choice, but a necessity, and that ambition, even in the poorest neighborhoods, could ignite change. But Lagos was no place for daydreams alone. The young Bola faced the stark realities of life: limited resources, school fees unpaid, and the ever-present shadow of political unrest flickering on the evening news. Yet amid hardship, he found hope. His earliest memories swirl with the laughter of street vendors, the rhythmic beats of distant drums, and the fierce pride of a city that refused to bow. At school, his sharp mind set him apart. Teachers whispered that he was destined for greatness, even as classmates envied his quiet confidence. Thousands of miles away, in the dry, sun-baked plains of Burkina Faso, a boy named Ibrahim Traoré was coming of age under a very different sky. The wind whispered across vast fields of millet and sorghum, and the air carried the scent of earth and fire. Traoré's village was small, tucked between rolling hills and sparse forests, a world of simplicity where everyone knew your name and family was everything. Raised in a close-knit household, Ibrahim's childhood was steeped in tradition and deep-rooted values. His grandparents' stories, shared under starlit skies, spoke of ancestors who fought for the land and justice. From his father, a respected community elder, he inherited a fierce sense of duty. From his mother, the warmth and determination that could move mountains. In the village, leadership was not about titles but about service. And even as a boy, Traoré showed signs of the kind of courage and integrity that would one day shake nations. Unlike the relentless pace of Lagos, Ibrahim's world moved with the rhythms of nature, planting seasons, harvests, and tribal ceremonies. Yet beneath this serene surface, he felt the stirrings of unrest. News of conflicts in neighboring regions, whispers of inequality, and the pain of seeing his people struggle kindled a fire within him. At school, he excelled, not just in academics, but in organizing, inspiring peers, and standing up when others remained silent. Both boys, worlds apart, shared an invisible thread, a hunger not just for personal success, but for something greater: justice, dignity, and the chance to rewrite the story of their people. Bola, amid the swirling chaos of Lagos, learned to wield politics like a weapon and a shield. Ibrahim, among the quiet strength of his village, nurtured the heart of a warrior and a leader. Their early lives were marked by hardship, yes, but also by an unwavering hope. Hope that one day their voices would break through the noise of history that their dreams, forged in poverty and perseverance, would become the engines of change. And here's the question that lingers. How does a boy from the teeming streets of Lagos and another from the dusty plains of Burkina Faso rise to challenge the very systems that once sought to silence them? What forces shape their destinies, and what storms lay ahead on the road to power? Stay with us as we unravel the extraordinary journeys of Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré, stories of grit, ambition, and the fierce fight to lead a continent yearning for transformation. After the humble beginnings in the vibrant yet challenging streets of Lagos, Bola Tinubu embarked on a path that would shape not only his own destiny, but the course of Nigeria itself. Determined to escape the confines of limited opportunity, he set his sights across the Atlantic, landing in the United States during a turbulent era marked by civil rights movements and political upheavals. Studying at Richard J. Daley College and later Chicago State University, Tinubu balanced rigorous academic pursuits with multiple jobs, from washing dishes to driving taxis, every effort fueled by an unyielding ambition. It was here, amid the bustling urban landscape and amidst a community of African diaspora, that he honed his understanding of governance, economics, and the complex mechanics of power. Yet the pull of home remained strong. Nigeria at the time was shackled by military dictatorships and economic instability. Despite the comforts and opportunities the West offered, Tinubu chose to return, ready to engage with the storm brewing in his homeland. The decision was not without risk. The political landscape was fraught with danger, uncertainty, and fierce rivalry. But for Tinubu, the call to serve his people and transform Nigeria's destiny outweighed personal safety. He quickly immersed himself in the tumultuous world of Nigerian politics, his sharp intellect and strategic mind allowing him to navigate treacherous waters. From serving as a senator during a fragile democratic experiment to becoming the governor of Lagos State, his rise was marked by both controversy and undeniable accomplishments. Tinubu's leadership style blended pragmatism with bold reforms, laying the groundwork for Nigeria's economic revival in the early 2000s. Through it all, he remained deeply aware that his role was not merely political power, but a responsibility toward a nation struggling to find its voice in the world. Meanwhile, far from the sprawling metropolis of Lagos, Ibrahim Traoré's journey unfolded under the harsh sun of the Sahel region. Unlike Tinubu's academic pursuits, Traoré's path was forged in the crucible of military service. Joining the Burkinabe Army in 2009, he quickly distinguished himself with a combination of tactical brilliance and unwavering commitment. His early years were spent confronting the rising threat of extremist groups that plagued West Africa, particularly in Mali and Burkina Faso. The battles were fierce, the terrain unforgiving, and the stakes immense. Innocent civilians caught in the crossfire, governments struggling to maintain order, and a continent's stability hanging in the balance. Traoré's ascent through the military ranks was no accident. It was born from countless nights spent planning operations, the weight of lost comrades pressing on his conscience, and a resolute belief that leadership meant more than command. It meant protection and sacrifice. In 2022, when the opportunity to lead presented itself amid widespread dissatisfaction with the government's handling of security issues, Traoré stepped forward, orchestrating a coup that resonated deeply with many Burkinabe citizens desperate for change. His leadership was not just about power, but about a vision, restoring dignity, stability, and hope to a fractured nation. Though their journeys were vastly different, one steeped in education and political maneuvering, the other carved through battlefield courage and military strategy, Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré share a profound commonality. Both emerged from humble beginnings, both faced adversity that could have easily derailed their dreams, yet they harnessed those challenges to fuel their determination to serve Africa. They understood early on that leadership was not a privilege, but a burden, one that required sacrifice, vision, and an unshakable connection to their people. Their contrasting paths also reveal the complexities of African leadership in the 21st century. Tinubu's experience in the halls of power, negotiations with global actors, and efforts to modernize a sprawling economy reflect a political realism shaped by decades of governance. Traoré's frontline combat experience and revolutionary stance underscore the urgency of security and grassroots empowerment in a continent still wrestling with insurgency and instability. Together, their stories paint a portrait of leadership that is as multifaceted as Africa itself, where diplomacy meets battlefield, tradition confronts innovation, and old systems clash with new ideas. Yet beneath these differences beats the same heart, a relentless passion for African progress. Each man carries the hopes of millions, hopes for peace, prosperity, and a future where Africa's potential is realized not just in rhetoric, but in reality. Their journeys, marked by sacrifice and tenacity, set the stage for the dramatic confrontation that would soon capture the attention of the world. This is a story not just about politics or power, but about the enduring spirit of a continent yearning for transformation. What drives a man to forsake comfort and certainty for the treacherous path of leadership? How do education and battle, cities and villages, diplomacy and revolution converge in the making of a leader? As we follow Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré deeper into their stories, these questions will guide us, challenging us to see beyond headlines and into the very soul of African leadership today. Bola Tinubu's time as governor of Lagos State from 1999 to 2007 was a defining chapter not only in his own political career, but also in the transformation of one of Africa's largest cities. Lagos, a sprawling megacity teeming with over 20 million inhabitants, was riddled with infrastructural decay, rampant corruption, and social inequality when Tinubu took office. His tenure was marked by a determined push to overhaul the city's governance, financial management, and public services. Through a combination of bold reforms and pragmatic policies, Tinubu succeeded in revitalizing Lagos's economy, improving tax collection, and attracting investments. He championed privatization initiatives and spearheaded improvements in transportation, sanitation, and education. The once chaotic city began to show signs of order and opportunity, earning Tinubu praise as a visionary leader capable of delivering tangible results. Yet his governorship was not without controversy. Critics accused him of wielding power with an iron fist, sidelining political opponents, and perpetuating patronage networks that solidified his influence. Allegations of corruption and political intimidation clouded his achievements, sparking intense debates about the costs of rapid development and political consolidation. Despite the criticism, Tinubu's Lagos became a powerful launchpad for his national ambitions. His governance style, combining firm control with strategic alliances, set the stage for his eventual rise to Nigeria's presidency, where he promised to replicate his urban successes on a national scale. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, Ibrahim Traoré's leadership emerged amid a far graver crisis. Burkina Faso, gripped by the violent insurgency spreading through the Sahel region, faced existential threats that challenged every facet of governance and security. Traoré's rise to power in the 2022 coup was not merely a grab for authority, but a response to widespread frustration with a government seen as ineffective against jihadist groups and regional instability. As a military officer deeply involved in frontline combat, Traoré brought firsthand knowledge of the security challenges facing Burkina Faso and the broader Sahel. His leadership emphasized restoring stability through a combination of military action, regional cooperation, and efforts to rebuild trust between the state and its citizens. Traoré's vision extended beyond mere security. He articulated a broader ambition to reform Burkina Faso's institutions, promote economic self-sufficiency, and empower its youth, who represented over half the population. His administration began pushing for stronger control over natural resources, advocating for greater sovereignty in economic policies, and calling for a pan-African approach to solving shared challenges. Though his leadership galvanized many hopeful for change, it also sparked unease among established powers both within and outside Burkina Faso, wary of a shift that threatened existing political and economic arrangements. As Tinubu's Lagos flourished under a firm hand and Traoré's Burkina Faso wrestled with chaos and renewal, a larger narrative was taking shape, one that hinted at the rising tensions and high stakes in African leadership. Both men embodied contrasting yet intertwined paths toward power: the politician who built his base through urban transformation and strategic governance, and the soldier who seized opportunity amid crisis to chart a new course. Their trajectories reflected the complex demands facing modern African leaders, balancing reform with tradition, stability with change, and domestic pressures with international expectations. The stage was set for a confrontation far greater than personal rivalry. It was a clash over the future direction of a continent caught between old hierarchies and emerging forces. In this unfolding drama, every decision, every word, would ripple across borders and generations, shaping how Africa would be led in the years to come. Africa's story is etched with the indelible marks of colonialism, a legacy that continues to shape the political and social landscapes of nations like Nigeria and Burkina Faso. Centuries of foreign domination left deep scars, borders drawn with little regard for ethnic, cultural, or linguistic realities, economies structured to serve distant empires, and governance systems imposed without consent. The consequences of this history remain painfully evident today, as leaders like Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré inherit not only the hopes of their people, but also the weight of fractured institutions and entrenched inequalities. In Nigeria, the largest and most populous country in Africa, colonial rule by the British unified a vast and diverse territory under a single administration, but it did so without fostering a cohesive national identity. The artificial borders lumped together hundreds of ethnic groups with competing interests, sowing seeds of division that erupted into conflict and political instability after independence. The economic model left behind was extractive and uneven, focused on resource extraction rather than broad-based development, creating a reliance on oil revenues that fluctuated wildly and deepened regional disparities. Tinubu's Nigeria is still wrestling with these inherited challenges: corruption, ethnic tensions, underdeveloped infrastructure, and a political culture shaped by decades of authoritarian rule and military coups. Burkina Faso's colonial past, though under French control, shares a similarly painful narrative. Known as Upper Volta during colonial times, the country was exploited for its natural resources with little regard for local welfare or sustainable growth. The French colonial administration maintained a tight grip on political power, leaving behind institutions that struggled to reflect the realities and aspirations of Burkinabe society. Post-independence, Burkina Faso faced repeated coups and political upheavals, a testament to the fragility of governance structures built on colonial foundations rather than indigenous legitimacy. Traoré's Burkina Faso is a nation caught between tradition and modernity, grappling with violence from jihadist insurgencies and the persistent poverty that colonial economic patterns left unresolved. For both Tinubu and Traoré, these historical legacies present more than just background context. They are daily realities to confront and, if possible, to overcome. The systems inherited from colonial rule are deeply embedded, from the judiciary and bureaucracy to the military and security apparatus. Attempts at reform are often hindered by the very structures meant to uphold the state, creating a paradox where leaders must work within institutions that are themselves part of the problem. This tension breeds frustration and skepticism among citizens who demand not just change in leadership, but transformation of the entire political order. Yet the burden these men carry is not only historical, they stand at the crossroads of rapidly shifting expectations. The Africa of today is young, vibrant, and connected like never before. More than 60% of the continent's population is under 25, a generation with access to information, education, and global networks that fuel their desire for dignity, opportunity, and justice. These young Africans reject the old excuses, the rhetoric of gradual reform, the tolerance of corruption, the acceptance of poverty as inevitable. They demand leaders who are accountable, transparent, and courageous enough to break free from the chains of history. Tinubu, with decades of political experience, embodies the challenge of navigating this complex landscape. He must reconcile the demands of a continent poised for change with the realities of a deeply entrenched system resistant to disruption. His tenure and policies reflect both attempts to stabilize Nigeria's sprawling economy and criticisms of perpetuating political patronage and exclusion. For many, he represents continuity, both the potential for progress and the weight of persistent obstacles. Traoré's position is perhaps even more fraught. Rising through the military ranks and seizing power through a coup, he symbolizes a break from established political norms. His leadership style reflects urgency and impatience with the status quo, aiming to confront security threats head-on and reshape governance structures to better serve the people. But this approach invites intense scrutiny and opposition from regional actors, international partners, and domestic rivals wary of instability. Traoré carries the hopes of many who feel left behind, but also the heavy responsibility of avoiding the pitfalls of authoritarianism and conflict that have plagued so many African states. The emotional tension that surrounds their leadership is palpable across the continent. On one hand, there is hope, the hope that new voices and visions can finally address the structural inequalities and injustices that have stifled African development. On the other, there is anxiety and fatigue, the fear that history may simply repeat itself, that leaders will fall prey to the very forces they sought to overcome. For millions of Africans watching closely, the stakes are nothing less than the future of their nations and their dignity as people. In this charged atmosphere, Tinubu and Traoré must not only lead their countries, but also navigate the complex legacy of colonialism and the rising tide of popular demands. Their successes and failures will reverberate far beyond their borders, influencing how Africa confronts its past and forges its future. The weight of history is heavy, but so too is the promise of a continent on the brink of transformation. As the story unfolds, we will see how these leaders grapple with the ghosts of colonialism while striving to meet the pressing needs of their people, a journey marked by courage, conflict, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Bola Tinubu's ascent to Nigeria's presidency was anything but smooth. Despite his long tenure as a powerful political figure and former governor of Lagos State, skepticism greeted his campaign with fierce opposition, both within his party and from rival factions. Nigeria's political landscape was a complex chessboard, riddled with shifting alliances, deep-seated rivalries, and a public weary of empty promises. For Tinubu, every step toward the presidency required navigating these treacherous waters with precision and resilience. Behind the scenes, political operatives played their hands carefully. Deals were brokered in shadowed rooms, loyalties tested, and enemies made. Tinubu's reputation as a political kingmaker both helped and hindered him. Some admired his strategic acumen, while others distrusted his consolidation of power. The campaign trail was marked by public debates, accusations, and relentless media scrutiny. Each day brought new challenges, from managing ethnic and regional tensions to countering narratives questioning his commitment to reform and his alleged involvement in corruption scandals. Despite the intense opposition, Tinubu's message resonated with many Nigerians desperate for stability and economic revival. His promises to tackle corruption, diversify the economy, and restore Nigeria's standing on the global stage offered a glimmer of hope. Yet the cost of his climb was high. The personal toll was evident in moments away from the spotlight. Long nights filled with difficult decisions, the strain on family relationships, and the isolation that comes from wielding power in a deeply divided nation. The loneliness of leadership weighed heavily on Tinubu, a reminder that behind every public triumph lies a private battle. Across the border in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré faced an equally turbulent but fundamentally different struggle. His grip on power was fragile, constantly threatened by internal dissent within the military and political elites, as well as pressures from regional and international actors wary of the recent coup. Unlike Tinubu's lengthy political career, Traoré's rise was swift, born out of crisis and necessity. Yet the speed of his ascent brought little time for consolidation or ease. The coup had divided the nation. Some saw Traoré as a savior, ready to confront insecurity and corruption. Others viewed him as a disruptor risking further instability. Within the military ranks, loyalty was tentative, with factions jockeying for influence and power. Civil society and political groups expressed both cautious optimism and vocal criticism, questioning the legitimacy and future direction of his government. Meanwhile, regional bodies in neighboring countries kept a watchful eye, balancing calls for stability with concerns over the precedent set by military takeovers. For Traoré, the challenges were immediate and relentless. Security threats from jihadist groups in the Sahel required constant vigilance and swift action. Economic hardships worsened by the ongoing conflicts demanded innovative solutions. And perhaps most daunting of all was the task of uniting a fractured population, a leader in a country where trust in government had long eroded. The weight of these responsibilities bore down on Traoré, isolating him in moments when the pressures of command and the doubts of those around him collided. The personal cost of power was palpable. Stories circulated of sleepless nights spent strategizing over security operations, moments of quiet reflection in the face of mounting challenges, and the profound loneliness that accompanies the burden of leadership in a volatile environment. Unlike the calculated political theater in Nigeria, Traoré's leadership was raw, immediate, and often brutal, a constant fight for survival on multiple fronts. Yet despite the differences in their struggles, both leaders shared the solitude that comes with being at the pinnacle of power. In the glare of public attention, surrounded by advisors and allies, both Tinubu and Traoré faced moments of profound isolation, the kind that only those who bear the weight of nations can truly understand. Their personal sacrifices, missed family moments, the erosion of privacy, and the constant scrutiny underscored the high price of leadership in today's Africa. This political turbulence also revealed the fragile balance between hope and despair on the continent. For millions of Africans watching from their homes, the success or failure of these leaders meant more than politics. It meant security, opportunity, and dignity. The stakes were enormous, and the margin for error razor-thin. In this precarious dance of power, every decision carried consequences that rippled through communities, economies, and futures. As the story unfolds, we witness two leaders wrestling not only with their rivals, but also with the ghosts of history, the demands of their people, and the daunting expectations of a continent on the cusp of transformation. Their journeys through political turbulence expose the raw realities of African leadership, where every victory is hard-fought, every alliance fragile, and every moment a test of character. The first sparks of ideological conflict between Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré emerged not through direct confrontation, but in the sharp contrasts of their visions for Africa's future. Tinubu, a seasoned politician shaped by decades of navigating Nigeria's complex power structures, embodied a traditional approach to leadership, one that emphasized gradual reform, pragmatic alliances, and working within established institutions. His speeches often invoked the necessity of stability, patience, and experience, urging a cautious path toward progress that respected existing systems, even when imperfect. In stark contrast, Traoré's revolutionary vision radiated urgency and radical change. Fresh from the battlefields of Burkina Faso and propelled by a mandate forged in crisis, he rejected the slow, incremental politics championed by figures like Tinubu. Instead, Traoré called for a fundamental overhaul of governance structures, dismantling corrupt institutions, reclaiming economic sovereignty, and empowering a new generation unwilling to accept the failures of their predecessors. His rhetoric was bold, unapologetic, and deeply rooted in the realities of those left behind by decades of neglect and exploitation. The ideological divide was palpable, but remained largely confined to speeches, policy papers, and private conversations, until a pivotal public moment crystallized the growing tension. At a major African leadership summit held in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, the continent's most powerful figures gathered to discuss unity, economic integration, and security. The event promised to be a showcase of solidarity, but beneath the surface, the air crackled with unspoken rivalries. When Tinubu took the stage to deliver the keynote address, his message was unmistakably clear. He extolled the virtues of experience, diplomatic tact, and working within existing frameworks. With a confident tone, he warned against the dangers of impulsive leadership, implicitly casting a shadow over younger, more radical leaders like Traoré. Leadership, Tinubu declared, is not a hobby for the restless young. It requires decades of preparation, patience, and the wisdom that comes with time. The room, filled with dignitaries and diplomats from across Africa, responded with polite applause, but many eyes turned toward Traoré, seated quietly among the emerging leaders. His expression was unreadable, but the tension was unmistakable. Traoré's vision, rooted in the lived experiences of his people facing terrorism, poverty, and political marginalization, clashed openly with Tinubu's call for cautious reform. Later that day, Traoré stepped forward during a moderated debate, seizing the moment to challenge the prevailing orthodoxy. Speaking with measured calm but undeniable conviction, he questioned the very institutions Tinubu sought to preserve. "How long must we wait for change?" Traoré asked. "How many decades of patient compromise will it take before the people see real progress? Our people are dying, fleeing their homes, and losing faith, not because change is complex, but because leadership has failed to act." His words rippled through the hall like a shock wave. Delegates exchanged uneasy glances. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked startled. Traoré was no longer the quiet outsider, but a formidable voice demanding accountability and bold action. The summit, intended as a forum for unity, had become the stage for a fundamental clash of visions. Between the established guard clinging to tradition and a new generation hungry for revolution. The first sparks of this ideological fire were lit not in closed-door meetings, but in this charged public arena. It was clear that the paths of Tinubu and Traoré would not just cross, they would collide. Each represented more than personal ambition. They embodied competing futures for Africa itself. As their differences unfolded, the continent watched, holding its breath for what would come next. Bola Tinubu carries the weight of Nigeria's future on his shoulders, a burden shaped by decades of political battles, personal sacrifices, and an unyielding commitment to his country. As a statesman, he stands at the crossroads of tradition and reform, tasked with preserving the delicate balance in one of Africa's most complex societies. Nigeria, with its over 200 million people, countless ethnic groups, and a history riddled with conflict and corruption, demands a leader who can weave together competing interests into a coherent vision. A task Tinubu has navigated with both skill and struggle. At the heart of Tinubu's mindset is an acute awareness of Nigeria's intricate social fabric. The country's diversity is both its strength and its challenge, requiring constant negotiation between regional powers, ethnic loyalties, and religious divides. Tinubu's years as Lagos governor and political strategist sharpened his ability to broker alliances and manage rivalries, a necessary skill in a nation where political survival often depends on coalition building. Yet this pragmatism sometimes comes at a cost. Balancing competing demands means making compromises that frustrate reformers and alienate critics who seek sweeping change. Tinubu understands this tension deeply, often wrestling privately with the gap between idealism and reality. International relations add another layer to this burden. Nigeria's role as Africa's largest economy and a regional powerhouse means Tinubu must engage with global actors, from Western governments to multinational corporations, each with their own agendas. Navigating this diplomatic minefield requires a careful blend of assertiveness and tact. Tinubu is aware that Nigeria's sovereignty and economic interest can easily be compromised by external pressures, yet outright defiance risks isolation and lost opportunities. This delicate dance shapes much of his policy decisions and public messaging as he strives to position Nigeria as both a leader in Africa and a respected player on the world stage. Emotions run deep beneath Tinubu's composed exterior. There is a profound sense of pride in what he has achieved, from transforming Lagos into a thriving economic hub to orchestrating political coalitions that brought him to the presidency. He sees himself as a custodian of Nigeria's potential, charged with unlocking the country's vast human and natural resources for the benefit of all its people. This pride fuels his determination, pushing him to endure the relentless pressures of office and the constant scrutiny of both supporters and detractors. Yet pride is tempered by frustration. Nigeria's challenges are immense and often stubborn. Corruption remains pervasive, undermining public trust and sapping resources meant for development. Insecurity continues to plague vast regions, with insurgencies and banditry causing untold suffering. Economic inequality widens even as pockets of wealth grow. Tinubu's efforts to address these issues are met with resistance from entrenched interests and political opponents, sometimes forcing him into political battles that distract from governance. These frustrations weigh heavily, moments when the enormity of the task threatens to overwhelm even the most seasoned leader. Despite these pressures, Tinubu's resolve remains unshaken. His political career, forged in the crucible of Nigerian politics, has taught him resilience. He knows that meaningful change often comes in increments rather than leaps, and that patience, though difficult, is a necessary virtue. His speeches frequently emphasize stability and continuity, underscoring the risks of upheaval in a nation still healing from decades of dictatorship and conflict. Yet beneath this cautious rhetoric lies a vision of reform, one that seeks to modernize Nigeria's economy, strengthen institutions, and promote inclusive governance. This duality, between cautious statesmanship and a reformist agenda, defines Tinubu's leadership. It shapes how he approaches policy, alliances, and public discourse. To some, he appears as a pragmatic elder statesman, preserving order and guiding Nigeria's growth. To others, he is a symbol of the old guard, reluctant to break fully with entrenched systems. For Tinubu himself, the line between these roles is often blurred, a constant balancing act that demands both strategic calculation and personal conviction. His personal life also reflects the sacrifices inherent in such leadership. Long hours, constant travel, and the never-ending demands of political life leave little time for family and personal reflection. Yet those close to him speak of a man deeply connected to his roots, grounded by his early experiences in Lagos and the values instilled by his family. This connection to his past fuels his commitment to Nigeria's future, a future he is determined to shape despite the burdens he carries. Ultimately, Bola Tinubu embodies the complexity of leadership in a nation as diverse and dynamic as Nigeria. His journey is marked by moments of triumph and trial, pride and frustration, hope and caution. As he continues to steer the country through uncertain times, the weight of his responsibility is both a heavy burden and a source of relentless motivation. A testament to the enduring challenge of leading Africa's giant, Ibrahim Traoré's path to leadership is forged in fire, a journey marked by fierce commitment to sovereignty, justice, and a profound dedication to the youth of Burkina Faso. Unlike many political figures who rise through traditional corridors of power, Traoré's resolve stems from a battlefield mentality shaped by the harsh realities of conflict and the urgent need to protect his nation's dignity. His leadership is not merely a title. It is a mission driven by a vision to reclaim control over his country's future from the shadows of external influence and internal decay. At the core of Traoré's philosophy lies a relentless pursuit of sovereignty. For him, true leadership means breaking free from the chains imposed by foreign powers and economic systems that have long exploited African nations under the guise of aid and cooperation. Traoré views Burkina Faso's struggles not just as internal failures, but as consequences of a global order that favors exploitation over empowerment. His call to dismantle these structures resonates deeply with a population tired of watching their resources siphoned off and their voices marginalized on the world stage. This fierce nationalism fuels his policies, from renegotiating mining contracts to challenging international financial institutions, aiming to restore Burkina Faso's rightful place as a sovereign actor in global affairs. Justice, too, is a pillar of Traoré's leadership. Raised in a community where stories of injustice and resilience were passed down through generations, he carries the weight of these narratives into his governance. His military background has exposed him to the stark realities of violence and oppression, reinforcing his belief that true justice must be uncompromising. Yet his pursuit of justice is tempered by pragmatism. He understands that sweeping change requires patience and strategic action, even as he maintains a revolutionary spirit that refuses to accept half measures. Traoré's justice is not abstract. It is deeply personal, a promise to those who have suffered violence and neglect that their plight will not be ignored. Perhaps most compelling is Traoré's commitment to youth empowerment. With over half of Burkina Faso's population under the age of 25, the country's future depends on its ability to harness the energy and creativity of its young people. Traoré speaks directly to this generation, acknowledging their frustrations and aspirations. He sees in them not just voters or subjects, but partners in building a new Burkina Faso, one where education, employment, and political participation are accessible to all. His rhetoric often emphasizes that the impatience and idealism of youth are strengths to be cultivated, not obstacles to be dismissed. This focus on youth empowerment is both a political strategy and a genuine belief, reflecting his recognition that lasting change must be rooted in generational renewal. Yet beneath this determined exterior lies a man burdened by moments of vulnerability. The cost of revolution is high, and Traoré knows it intimately. The weight of responsibility rests heavily on his shoulders. The lives disrupted by conflict, the families torn apart, the constant threat of assassination or betrayal. There are nights when doubt creeps in, when the enormity of the challenges threatens to overwhelm even the most resolute heart. Yet these moments of uncertainty do not weaken him. Rather, they deepen his resolve. They remind him of the stakes and the necessity of his mission. Sacrifices abound in Traoré's life. Personal relationships strained by the demands of leadership, the loss of comrades in battle, and the isolation that comes with holding unpopular but necessary decisions. Unlike many leaders who enjoy the comforts of power, Traoré's days are filled with meetings in austere rooms, visits to devastated villages, and the constant balancing act of military strategy and political negotiation. The loneliness of command is palpable, yet he embraces it as part of the price for change. The heavy cost of revolution is also reflected in the broader societal tensions that Traoré must navigate. His government faces opposition not only from entrenched political elites, but also from external forces uneasy with his assertive stance. The pressure to conform to international norms conflicts with his desire to chart an independent course. Managing these pressures requires a delicate mix of courage and diplomacy, a balancing act that tests his leadership daily. Through it all, Traoré's resolve remains unbroken. His vision of a sovereign, just, and youth-empowered Burkina Faso guides his every decision. He embodies a new kind of African leadership, one born of struggle, tempered by sacrifice, and driven by an unwavering belief in the possibility of transformation. His journey is a testament to the power of conviction in the face of adversity, and a reminder that true leadership demands not only strength, but also the courage to confront one's own doubts. As the story of Ibrahim Traoré unfolds, we see a leader who is both warrior and visionary, grappling with the harsh realities of power while holding fast to the promise of a better future for his people. His resolve inspires hope, but also underscores the profound challenges that lie ahead on the path to lasting change. Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré stand as two towering figures on the African stage, each embodying visions and values shaped by their unique journeys, yet united by a shared commitment to their nations and continent. Their leadership styles reveal striking contrasts, but beneath those differences lies a common thread: the burden of responsibility and the hope for transformation. Tinubu's approach is rooted in experience and tradition. A consummate politician, he operates within the established frameworks of governance, emphasizing gradual reform, coalition building, and diplomatic engagement. His style is measured, calculated, and often pragmatic, reflecting decades of navigating Nigeria's complex political landscape. Tinubu values stability, viewing it as the foundation upon which progress can be built. His vision for Nigeria and Africa leans toward incremental change, preserving institutions while adapting them to new challenges. He champions economic modernization, improved governance, and stronger international partnerships, believing that patience and persistence will yield sustainable development. In contrast, Traoré's leadership is bold, urgent, and revolutionary. Emerging from the crucible of conflict, he rejects the slow pace of traditional politics, advocating for radical transformation that dismantles corrupt systems and reclaims sovereignty. Traoré's style is direct and unapologetic, fueled by a deep connection to grassroots struggles and a fierce desire to empower the youth. His vision centers on justice, self-determination, and breaking free from neo-colonial influences that have long hindered African progress. For Traoré, leadership demands courage to disrupt the status quo, even at great personal risk. Despite these differences, both leaders share key similarities. They are products of adversity, shaped by environments that demanded resilience and strategic thinking. Both carry the heavy weight of history, tasked with healing divisions and guiding nations through turbulent times. Each understands that leadership is not just about power, but about service, a commitment to improving the lives of millions who look to them for hope. Their journeys reflect a blend of personal ambition and collective responsibility, highlighting the complex realities of African leadership today. The stakes of their leadership extend far beyond their individual legacies. For Nigeria, Tinubu's decisions impact the economic and political stability of a country that serves as a linchpin for West Africa. His success or failure reverberates across the continent, influencing regional security, trade, and diplomatic relations. Similarly, Traoré's leadership in Burkina Faso carries profound implications for the Sahel region's security and the broader struggle against extremism. His ability to unify and rebuild a nation fractured by violence affects not only Burkina Faso, but neighboring countries facing similar threats. Together, Tinubu and Traoré symbolize the crossroads at which Africa stands, between continuity and change, tradition and revolution, cautious reform, and bold transformation. Their divergent paths and shared burdens encapsulate the challenges confronting a continent eager to redefine itself in the 21st century. In their leadership, the future of millions rests, and their actions will shape the narrative of African sovereignty, development, and dignity for years to come. As their stories unfold side by side, we are reminded that leadership in Africa is a complex mirror, reflecting both the fractures and the hopes of the societies they serve. It is a mirror that demands courage, wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to the promise of a better tomorrow. The Grand Hall of the International Conference Center in Abuja was charged with anticipation, as if the very air itself was waiting for history to be made. Banners proclaiming unity through prosperity and African Renaissance hung from the ceiling, their lofty promises contrasting sharply with the undercurrent of tension simmering beneath the polished surface. Delegates from 23 African nations filled the ornate chairs, their conversations a multilingual symphony of French, English, Arabic, and dozens of local dialects. Cameras from CNN International, BBC Africa, France 24, and Al Jazeera were strategically positioned, their lenses focused on capturing every nuance of what was to come. Social media teams prepared to live stream the event, aware that millions across the continent and beyond would be watching, hungry for political drama and signs of change. At the center of this gathering storm stood Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, a seasoned statesman whose reputation as a political powerhouse preceded him. Clad in a gold-trimmed agbada that shimmered under the bright conference lights, he commanded attention with the practiced ease of a man who had navigated the treacherous waters of Nigerian politics for decades. His laugh, loud and theatrical, echoed occasionally through the hall, a reminder of his confidence and authority. But beneath that confidence lay a calculated intent. Today, he would publicly challenge one of Africa's youngest and most radical leaders, Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré. Traoré arrived quietly, a stark contrast to Tinubu's flamboyance. The 34-year-old president cut a striking figure against the backdrop of seasoned politicians. His simple, impeccably tailored brown suit and modest security detail spoke volumes. Here was a leader unburdened by the trappings of power, focused instead on the pressing realities his country faced. He took his seat among the emerging leaders, not in the front row reserved for the continent's most influential powers. Whispers rippled through the room. The young military officer from Burkina Faso seemed almost out of place amidst the gray-haired statesmen and career politicians. Yet his presence was impossible to ignore. As the children's choir sang the African Union anthem in Swahili, their voices soaring through the acoustics of the hall, the ceremonial prayers and economic presentations that followed felt like a prelude to the real event. The delegates knew the summit's true drama would begin when Tinubu took the podium. And when he did, the atmosphere shifted palpably. Tinubu's opening lines were polished and familiar, a call for unity, stability, and progress. But as he warmed to his theme, His tone took on a sharper edge. He praised the wisdom of older leaders and subtly dismissed what he called the impulsive governance of younger politicians. His gaze swept the audience before landing directly on Traoré with a mixture of condescension and challenge. Leadership, he intoned, is not a hobby for the restless young. It requires decades of preparation, patient learning, and the maturity that only experience can bring. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some delegates nodded respectfully, while others exchanged uncertain glances. The room held its collective breath. The cameras instinctively zoomed in on Traoré's face, searching for a crack in his composure. But the young leader remained unmoved, his expression calm, almost unreadable. Tinubu pressed forward, his voice growing louder, his rhetoric more pointed. He questioned the qualifications of young leaders who came to power through military coups or revolutionary slogans. Laughter, scattered and nervous, rippled through parts of the hall, while other sections fell into uneasy silence. The air was thick with anticipation. Everyone sensed that this was no ordinary political speech. Then, in a moment that would be replayed across Africa for months to come, Traoré rose. His movement was deliberate and calm, yet carried the weight of a man prepared to change the course of the conversation. Without a hint of anger or agitation, he approached the microphone, adjusted its height, and addressed the assembly and the millions watching live. With a clarity and conviction that stunned the room. The summit had transformed from a routine diplomatic gathering into a battleground for Africa's future. The cameras captured every word, every gesture. Journalists frantically typed updates. Social media managers sent alerts to millions eager for the unfolding drama. The atmosphere was electric, a mixture of shock, admiration, and disbelief. Outside the conference center, the streets of Abuja buzzed with activity. Citizens gathered in front of screens, watching live, debating fiercely. In homes, university lecture halls, and cafes across Africa, Traoré's words ignited conversations about leadership, accountability, and the continent's path forward. Inside the hall, the weight of history pressed down on every attendee. The summit was no longer just a meeting, it was a defining moment, a collision between established power and revolutionary change. The storm had gathered, and its first thunderclap had shaken the foundations of African politics. The hall fell into a heavy silence as Bola Tinubu fixed his gaze on Ibrahim Traoré. The air was thick with anticipation, every eye locked on the two leaders whose words were about to ignite a confrontation that transcended politics. Tinubu, with the confidence of a man seasoned by decades in power, began to speak, his voice firm, deliberate, and carrying the weight of authority. Leadership, Tinubu declared, is not a pastime for the restless youth. It is a sacred responsibility earned through years of patient service, steeped in experience and the wisdom that comes with age. We cannot entrust the future of our continent to impulsive gestures or revolutionary slogans broadcast on social media. His words cut through the room, a clear rebuke aimed not just at Traoré but at a rising generation of African leaders challenging the status quo. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some nodded in agreement, valuing the steadiness Tinubu championed, while others shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension beneath his polished rhetoric. Tinubu continued, painting a picture of leadership as a complex craft, one that required deep understanding of institutions, diplomatic finesse, and the patience to navigate Africa's intricate political realities. Revolution without experience is chaos, he warned, his eyes lingering on Traoré, and chaos does not build nations. Traoré listened quietly, his posture composed yet unyielding. When his turn came, he rose with calm authority, a steady presence against the thunder of Tinubu's critique. Adjusting the microphone, he began not with anger, but with a measured clarity that commanded attention. "President Tinubu," he said respectfully, "you ask what qualifies one to lead. You speak of age and experience as the marks of true leadership. These are fair questions, and they deserve honest answers." He paused, scanning the faces of delegates and millions more watching across Africa. "But I ask you, what is the purpose of experience if it merely preserves systems that fail our people? What value does age hold if it shields us from accountability?" His voice grew stronger, each word deliberate and cutting. Leadership is not about how long one has held office or mastered diplomatic protocol. It is about results. The lives improved, the dignity restored, the futures secured. The hall was electrified by Traoré's words. A ripple of murmurs spread as delegates absorbed the challenge. Some faces showed surprise, others admiration. Traoré's message struck a chord with many, especially the younger observers who saw in him a reflection of their own frustrations and hopes. He was not merely defending himself, he was redefining leadership itself. I have buried children killed by terrorism while budgets were debated, Traoré continued, his voice steady but laden with grief. I have walked villages without electricity, while presidents live in palaces with generators. I have heard mothers explain why they risk death crossing seas rather than remain in their homeland. These are the realities that define true leadership, not the comfort of office or the security of tradition. Tinubu's expression tightened, a flicker of anger passing behind his composed facade. The room sensed the shift, the rising stakes of this verbal duel. But Traoré remained unshaken, his tone now a blend of challenge and conviction. You speak of institutions, the World Bank, IMF, the Security Council. But what have they done for the average African? Debt, austerity, exclusion. These are not just external forces. They are part of the system that has failed our people for decades. The emotional intensity in the hall escalated. Some delegates leaned forward, captivated by Traoré's forceful critique, while others exchanged wary glances, unsettled by the boldness of his words. The cameras captured every moment. The tension, the resolve, the unspoken battle for the continent's soul. Tinubu rose slightly from his chair, preparing to respond, but Traoré's words had already shifted the narrative. He was no longer the young upstart. He had become a voice for millions demanding change, a symbol of resistance against complacency and broken promises. The hall was divided between the reverence for experience and the hunger for results. As the exchange drew to a close, the atmosphere was charged with conflicting emotions: shock at the public confrontation, admiration for Traoré's courage, and a palpable tension about what this moment meant for African leadership. The summit had transformed into a crucible, testing not just individual reputations, but the very ideas that would shape the continent's future. Outside the conference center, the impact was immediate. Social media erupted with clips and commentary, igniting debates across cities and villages. Young Africans shared the exchange with fervor, seeing in Traoré's rebuttal a call to action and a reimagining of what leadership could be. For many, the words spoken in that hall were more than rhetoric. They were a spark lighting a broader movement. Inside, as the delegates processed the confrontation, it was clear that this was only the beginning. The battle of words had laid bare the deep divisions and urgent questions facing Africa. And at the heart of it all were two leaders, one defending the legacy of experience, the other demanding the revolution of results, locked in a struggle that would echo far beyond the walls of the summit. The moment Ibrahim Traoré's words echoed through the Grand Hall in Abuja, the political landscape of Africa began to tremble. What had started as a scheduled summit rapidly transformed into a historic watershed, with public reactions pouring in from every corner of the continent. Social media platforms exploded with millions of shares, comments, and heated debates as ordinary Africans witnessed a rare spectacle. A young leader boldly confronting the entrenched power of a seasoned statesman. Videos of the exchange went viral within hours. Hashtags like #Traoré Speaks and #NewAfricaLeadership trended across Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram, sparking conversations far beyond political circles. University students organized viewing parties to analyze every word, while market vendors and taxi drivers in bustling cities from Lagos to Accra discussed the implications of Traoré's challenge. For many young Africans, his speech was not just a political statement, it was a clarion call to reclaim their futures. Traditional media outlets scrambled to cover the story. International news networks featured special segments dissecting the confrontation, framing it as a symbolic clash between the old guard and a rising generation of leaders demanding accountability and tangible results. African newspapers carried front-page analyses with opinion writers divided between praising Traoré's courage and warning of the risks his style might bring to regional stability. Within political circles, the repercussions were immediate and palpable. Some established leaders privately expressed unease, viewing Traoré's rhetoric as a destabilizing challenge to diplomatic norms and regional cooperation. Yet others, particularly younger politicians and reform-minded officials, found inspiration in his words. In countries across the continent, conversations about leadership began to shift, focusing less on protocol and more on performance, less on seniority and more on service. Nigeria's government, caught off guard by the widespread resonance of Traoré's critique, responded cautiously at first. Official statements downplayed the incident as a diplomatic misunderstanding or youthful inexperience. However, as social media pressure mounted and civil society groups echoed Traoré's calls for transparency and reform, the administration adopted a more defensive posture. Attempts to suppress the spread of the videos only fueled public curiosity and skepticism, intensifying the dialogue around governance and accountability. The summit's aftershocks also rippled through regional organizations. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, found itself at a crossroads, with member states increasingly debating the need to rethink traditional leadership models and economic partnerships. The conversation Traoré ignited about monetary sovereignty and resource control gained new momentum, challenging long-held assumptions and opening the door for more assertive stances on Africa's economic independence. As the dust settled, a broader narrative began to emerge, one that framed the summit not merely as a clash between two presidents, but as the birth of a new era in African leadership. This era would be defined by a willingness to speak truth to power, a refusal to accept failure as inevitable, and a commitment to centering the voices of the youth and marginalized. The dynamic between tradition and transformation, patience and urgency, was now at the forefront of continental discourse. The exchange had shifted the gravitational center of African politics. What had once been dominated by cautious diplomacy and guarded rhetoric was giving way to bold challenges and renewed demands for justice and progress. The summit became a symbol, a moment when the continent's future was debated not behind closed doors, but in the open, where millions could witness and participate. In this shifting landscape, Bola Tinubu's confidence faced new tests, while Ibrahim Traoré's profile soared. The balance of power, long weighted toward established leaders, now had to contend with an emerging generation empowered by technology, connected by shared struggles, and unafraid to demand change. Africa stood on the brink. The conversation had changed, and with it, the possibilities for the continent's destiny. The corridors of power often feel cold and unyielding, a stark contrast to the hopes and fears carried by the millions their decisions affect. For Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré, the burdens of governance are heavy and unrelenting, each facing a daunting array of domestic challenges that test their leadership and resolve daily. In Nigeria, Tinubu grapples with an economy beset by deep-seated structural problems. Despite being Africa's largest economy and possessing vast natural resources, Nigeria continues to face soaring unemployment, inflation, and a crippling reliance on oil exports. The global fluctuations in oil prices ripple through the economy, hitting ordinary Nigerians hardest. Markets are volatile, small businesses struggle to survive, and the widening gap between the rich and poor fuels growing discontent. Tinubu's vision of economic diversification, while ambitious, is slowed by bureaucratic inertia, corruption, and competing political interests. The pressure to deliver tangible improvements mounts relentlessly. Security is another heavy weight on Tinubu's shoulders. Nigeria's North and Middle Belt regions are plagued by insurgencies, banditry, and kidnappings that have left thousands dead and displaced millions. The government's efforts to quell these conflicts often seem piecemeal, hampered by limited resources, inadequate intelligence, and fractured local alliances. For Tinubu, the challenge is not just military but political, building trust among diverse communities while maintaining the unity of a fragile federation. Every day brings new reports of violence, and with them, the haunting question of whether the state can protect its most vulnerable citizens. Political unrest simmers beneath the surface. Nigeria's vibrant democracy is tested by ethnic tensions, election controversies, and public dissatisfaction with governance. Protests erupt over economic grievances and allegations of corruption, demanding accountability and reform. Tinubu must navigate a labyrinth of competing factions within his ruling coalition and opposition parties, balancing demands for change with the need for political stability. Moments of crisis punctuate his tenure, from contested elections to protests that threaten to spiral into violence. Each challenge requires a delicate blend of firmness and concession, a test of his political acumen and emotional endurance. Amid these vast national issues lie Tinubu's personal struggles, the relentless public scrutiny, the weight of expectations, and the isolation that accompanies high office weigh heavily on him. Late nights poring over policy papers are punctuated by moments of reflection where the enormity of the task presses in. The gap between political rhetoric and lived realities often fuels frustration. Yet his pride in serving Nigeria and his determination to steer the country through turbulent times remain unshaken, driving him forward despite the toll on his health and family life. Across the Sahel, Ibrahim Traoré faces his own crucible of governance. Burkina Faso's challenges are no less daunting, perhaps more immediate and stark. The nation wrestles with ongoing jihadist insurgencies that have destabilized vast swathes of territory. Villages are abandoned, schools and clinics shuttered, and fear permeates daily life. Traoré's military background informs his approach, decisive, sometimes harsh, but he is keenly aware that security alone cannot restore peace. The social and economic wounds run deep, requiring comprehensive strategies that address poverty, education, and governance. Economically, Burkina Faso is one of the poorest countries in the world, its development hampered by limited infrastructure, reliance on agriculture vulnerable to climate change, and constrained financial resources. Traoré's government faces the Herculean task of rebuilding the economy amid instability, attracting investment while asserting sovereignty over resource extraction. The pressure to deliver jobs and basic services is relentless, especially from a young population desperate for opportunities and dignity. Political unrest is a constant companion. The coup that brought Traoré to power exposed fractures within the military, political elites, and civil society. Maintaining cohesion requires balancing competing interests, managing dissent, and projecting legitimacy both domestically and internationally. Opposition voices grow louder, questioning his methods and motives, while international partners watch cautiously, wary of endorsing a leader who came to power through force. Traoré must walk a tightrope, asserting authority while cultivating consensus. Behind the public role, Traoré's personal journey is marked by sacrifice and solitude. The toll of leadership in a conflict zone is profound. The sleepless nights filled with difficult decisions, the weight of lives lost, and the isolation from family and friends. Yet his resolve is steeled by a deep commitment to justice and a vision of a renewed Burkina Faso. The burden is immense, but so is his conviction that transformation is possible. For both leaders, governance is not merely administration. It is a relentless test of character, endurance, and vision. The economic hardships, insurgencies, and political unrest they face are intertwined challenges that define their legacies. Their personal struggles reveal the human dimension behind the headlines, the loneliness, the doubt, and the unyielding determination to serve in the face of overwhelming odds. In the intricate world of African politics, leadership is rarely a solitary endeavor. For Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré, navigating the labyrinth of allies and enemies is as crucial as managing the crises on their doorsteps. Behind the public speeches and official meetings lies a shadow game of diplomacy, backdoor negotiations, and shifting alliances that can determine their survival and success. Tinubu's political landscape is a complex web woven from decades of experience, patronage, and power plays. Within Nigeria's ruling party, factions jostle for influence, each with their own agendas and ambitions. Tinubu must constantly balance these competing interests, rewarding loyalty while quelling dissent. Some party members see him as a unifying force. Others view him as a gatekeeper who monopolizes access to power and resources. Trust is fragile, and betrayals lurk in unexpected corners. Political rivals often masquerade as allies, ready to pounce when opportunities arise. Tinubu's survival depends on his ability to read the room, maintain strategic partnerships, and, when necessary, strike deals that keep his coalition intact. Beyond national borders, Tinubu's influence extends into regional alliances that are both opportunities and challenges. Nigeria's position as West Africa's largest economy gives Tinubu significant sway in the economic community of West African states, ECOWAS, but this power is constantly tested by competing interests from neighboring countries. Some regional leaders respect Nigeria's leadership, while others chafe under what they perceive as dominance. Tinubu's diplomacy requires a careful balance between asserting Nigeria's interests and fostering cooperation, often involving subtle negotiations behind closed doors. These regional dynamics are further complicated by the presence of international actors, whose support or opposition can tilt the scales in unpredictable ways. International pressure is a constant undercurrent in Tinubu's political life. Foreign governments and multinational corporations watch Nigeria closely, their interests tied to the country's vast markets and resources. Diplomacy in this arena demands tact and sometimes compromise. Tinubu must navigate relationships that range from strategic partnerships to cautious skepticism. Behind the scenes, there are delicate conversations about trade agreements, security cooperation, and development aid. Some of these dealings spark controversy at home, fueling accusations of undue foreign influence. Maintaining sovereignty while engaging internationally is a tightrope walk fraught with risk. For Ibrahim Traoré, the stakes in alliances and enmities are even more immediate and perilous. His rise to power through a military coup has left the political terrain fractured, with many factions either skeptical or outright hostile. Within Burkina Faso's military and political elite, loyalties are divided. Some commanders and officials support Traoré's vision for radical change. Others resent his rapid ascent and challenge his authority. The threat of internal dissent and possible coup attempts looms large. Traoré's leadership depends on cultivating trust among key allies, but also on outmaneuvering adversaries who seek to undermine him. Regionally, Traoré's Burkina Faso sits at the heart of the volatile Sahel region, where security concerns dominate diplomacy. Alliances here are fragile and often transactional, shaped by the urgent need to combat insurgencies and manage cross-border tensions. Traoré must engage with neighboring countries whose priorities sometimes conflict with his own, forging coalitions that can deliver stability while guarding against encroachment. These regional partnerships are essential but complex, requiring constant negotiation and, at times, concession. International actors play a significant role in Traoré's calculus. His government's legitimacy and access to resources hinge on relationships with global powers, donor agencies, and multilateral institutions. Yet these relationships are fraught with suspicion and conditionality. Some foreign partners demand reforms and transparency, while others prioritize security cooperation. Traoré's challenge is to secure necessary support without compromising Burkina Faso's sovereignty or his revolutionary agenda. This balancing act involves careful diplomacy and sometimes covert negotiations, where appearances can be deceiving and promises easily broken. Both leaders must navigate a political ecosystem where friends can become foes overnight and enemies may be temporary allies. Diplomacy is a game of patience, calculation, and occasional ruthlessness. Backroom deals are struck, alliances forged, and betrayals endured. The art of leadership in this context extends far beyond public speeches. It is a daily battle to maintain power, influence, and the ability to govern. As Tinubu and Traoré weave their webs of allies and adversaries, the lines between friendship and rivalry blur. The outcomes of these intricate relationships will not only shape their political fates, but also the future of their nations and the broader African continent. In this high-stakes arena, loyalty is precious, betrayal devastating, and every move counts. In the quiet moments behind the scenes, away from the glare of cameras and the din of political battles, both Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré confront the profound loneliness that comes with leadership. Despite their differences, they share an intimate understanding of the heavy burden they carry. a weight that often isolates them even as millions look to them for guidance and hope. Tinubu sits alone in his private study late into the night, the soft glow of a desk lamp casting long shadows across maps and reports sprawled before him. The cacophony of Nigeria's problems, economic struggles, security crises, political rivalries, seems distant in the stillness, yet the magnitude of his responsibility presses down with relentless force. He reflects on the compromises made, the allies lost, and the skepticism that surrounds him. The roar of public opinion, both supportive and critical, is a constant companion, reminding him that every decision carries the potential to uplift or devastate. In these moments, Tinubu's pride mingles with frustration and weariness. The path he has chosen is arduous, marked by setbacks and sacrifices. Yet beneath the exhaustion lies a deep, unshakable resolve, a commitment to steer Nigeria through its turbulence toward a more stable and prosperous future. He knows that leadership is not about perfection, but persistence. His thoughts often return to the millions who depend on his steadiness, fueling a quiet hope that despite the challenges, progress is within reach. Thousands of miles away, in the heart of Burkina Faso, Traoré experiences a similar solitude. After long days of strategizing, negotiating, and confronting the harsh realities of insurgency and poverty, he retreats to the modest confines of his residence. The weight of recent battles, both literal and political, lingers in his mind. Faces of those lost to violence haunt his reflections, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Yet alongside grief and doubt, there is an abiding conviction that his revolutionary mission is just and necessary. Traoré's resolve is forged not only from personal ambition, but from a profound sense of duty to his people, especially the youth who see in him a beacon of hope. He contemplates the road ahead, knowing that the path to transformation is neither quick nor easy. The pressure to deliver tangible results is immense, and the risks of failure carry heavy consequences. Yet even in the darkest moments, Traoré's spirit remains unbroken. He draws strength from the belief that change requires courage, sacrifice, and unwavering determination. Both leaders, in their solitude, confront the paradox of power. The isolation it brings contrasted with the immense responsibility it demands. They grapple with doubts that no public speech can erase and face decisions that will shape the destinies of millions. Yet within this solitude lies the heartbeat of true leadership, the resolve to persist despite uncertainty, the courage to bear the burdens alone, and the hope that their efforts will forge a better future. These moments of introspection reveal the human side of two men often seen only as political figures. Their journeys are marked not just by ambition or ideology, but by the quiet, steadfast commitment to serve, to lead with integrity, resilience, and an unyielding hope that, against all odds, progress is possible. President Bola Tinubu embarks on ambitious economic reforms aimed at diversifying Nigeria's economy, improving infrastructure, and attracting foreign investment. His diplomatic efforts focus on strengthening regional ties and asserting Nigeria's leadership role in Africa. Reactions are mixed. Some praise his vision, others criticize slow progress and lingering corruption. Meanwhile, Ibrahim Traoré advances military reforms to stabilize Burkina Faso, alongside social policies that promote education, healthcare, and youth empowerment. He champions African sovereignty, advocating for reduced foreign influence and greater control over resources. Both leaders demonstrate boldness, signaling a new chapter for their nations and the continent. Despite their rivalry, Tinubu and Traoré engage in cautious dialogue, seeking areas of cooperation to address shared challenges like security, trade, and climate change. Symbolic gestures at regional summits and joint initiatives reflect a tentative respect and recognition of common goals. These moments highlight the potential for unity amid diversity, emphasizing that Africa's future depends on collaboration as much as competition. The narrative shifts toward hope, suggesting that even rivals can find common ground in pursuit of continental progress. Across Africa, the youth see both leaders as catalysts for change and subjects of scrutiny. Young activists and entrepreneurs share stories of inspiration drawn from Tinubu's reforms and Traoré's revolutionary spirit. They voice frustrations with lingering inequalities, but also express hope fueled by these leaders' commitments. Emotional vignettes capture the energy and impatience of a generation eager to shape their own destinies, demanding accountability, innovation, and genuine inclusion. This rising youth movement promises to redefine African leadership and its relationship with the people it serves. After the intense challenges and confrontations, both Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré begin the process of healing and reconstruction. They work closely with their teams and communities to rebuild trust, stabilize their nations, and lay foundations for sustainable growth. This period is marked by renewed hope, a sense of peace, and moments of genuine happiness as progress slowly takes root. The focus is on moving forward together, showing resilience in the face of adversity and the power of collective effort to overcome past hardships. In reflective moments, the two leaders share profound messages about sacrifice, friendship, and the deeper meaning of leadership in life. They acknowledge the costs of power, but emphasize the importance of serving others with humility and integrity. Their words are heartfelt and inspiring, reminding audiences that true leadership transcends personal ambition and is rooted in commitment to the greater good. This section leaves a lasting emotional impact, encouraging viewers to embrace courage, empathy, and hope in their own lives. The story closes with an open-ended tone, hinting at new challenges and adventures on the horizon for both leaders and the continent. There is an air of excitement and anticipation, inviting the audience to imagine what the future might hold. This open conclusion sparks curiosity and eagerness for what comes next, suggesting that the journey toward Africa's renewal and transformation is ongoing and full of possibilities. The story of Bola Tinubu and Ibrahim Traoré offers a profound reflection on leadership, resilience, and the evolving nature of power. It highlights that leadership is not a fixed concept bound by tradition or seniority, but a living practice shaped by purpose, accountability, and connection to the people served. Both leaders face immense challenges: political turmoil, social unrest, and economic hardship. But it is their responses that define them. Tinubu's experience and stature contrast with Traoré's youthful determination and revolutionary zeal, yet both are driven by a shared desire to uplift their nations. What stands out most is the courage to confront uncomfortable truths and the humility to listen, adapt, and learn. Traoré's willingness to challenge established norms and Tinubu's efforts to maintain unity amidst complexity illustrate that leadership requires both boldness and wisdom. This narrative inspires us to reconsider how we view authority and change. It encourages embracing new voices while respecting experience, fostering dialogue over division. As individuals, the story invites us to reflect on our own roles in the communities and systems we belong to. How do we respond when faced with injustice or stagnation? Are we willing to question outdated structures and act for progress? Most importantly, how can we lead in our own ways, no matter our age or status, to contribute to a more just and hopeful future? What small action will you choose today to be a catalyst for positive change in your life or community? If this story touched you, don't let it stop here. Like, share, and subscribe to Captain of Truth, where every voice matters and every story echoes far beyond the screen. This story is a fictionalized and dramatized narrative created for educational, inspirational, and storytelling purposes. While it may be inspired by real public events, people, or societal issues, it includes imagined dialogue, reconstructed scenes, and character interpretations meant to highlight broader themes of justice, dignity, and resilience. Any resemblance to actual events or individuals beyond public knowledge is purely coincidental. We do not intend to defame, mislead, or harm, but to invite reflection and meaningful conversation. Thank you for watching Captain of Truth.